Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey alongside Anthony Broom. Chris Ballas not able to make it today. But Anthony, we're going to talk Michigan football. Surprise, surprise. 79 days till the Wolverines take the field against New Mexico. If you're excited for the season, make sure to hit that like button. We got to get to 200 likes on this video. If you're watching on YouTube, that thumbs up is much appreciated. Subscribe to our channel as well. That will get you all of the latest videos, breaking news videos when commits drop, and those are coming fast and furious now that it is official visit season in the recruiting world. And as always, head to the Wolverine.com. You can use the promo code UM1 right now for 2 months of premium access for just $1. Gets you on our message board, The Fort. You can interact with Michigan fans, get the latest on Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting behind the paywall on all of our articles as well. Anthony, we're in a sneaky great time in the sports calendar with NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Finals, U.S. Open started today. Detroit Tigers, not great last night, but they're in the mix. That makes it fun. And as we said, 79 days until football season, so you got that anticipation building up. I'm enjoying sports life right now as a sports fan.
The countdown's going fast. I feel like we just started the 100 days and we're already inside of 80. So, again, to quote Chris Ballas, not wishing our summers away, but it is fast approaching. And with this football preview sort of, I won't say now on the back burner, you and I are both finished with our part of it. And I found myself, and I said this last week too, the itch is there now. Like I'm excited for football. If I once we do that, it does feel like you kind of have officially turned the page to the next season. Spring ball isn't quite the same in that regard. It's kind of like an epilogue or prologue to the next year. Um, but yeah, I'm fired up and doesn't hurt to have the best team in baseball that you root for, the two of us selfishly. I know that's not a universal experience among our listeners, but good times. Good time in the calendar and enjoy it because about a month from today, there's going to be that week or so after the MLB All-Star game where we're just in the Sahara Desert for a couple days. So
Yeah,
these are the good times.
no doubt, no doubt. Enjoy it while we can. Do you see what I'm wearing today?
Yes, I was wondering. I saw the little Nike swoosh on the shoulders because you're kind of leaning down talking to the mic, so I didn't see the NFL emblem. For those of you not watching the video edition, we are Clayton Safey sporting an all white JJ McCarthy Minnesota Vikings jersey here, and also
That's
I'll
right.
say bit of a bones production today. Our normal podcast recording app is having some tech issues, so you just have to look at us for however long we're here.
Yeah, no B-roll today. We're on Zoom like the olden days, way way back in about what 2021 or something like that when people used to use this for podcasts. Yes, I'm wearing a JJ McCarthy jersey, Minnesota Vikings. I bought it last year after the draft. Didn't get much use because he didn't play, but he is now projected to start for the Vikings this year. That's not new news. But Anthony, the reason why I'm wearing it today is because I think it might be the year of JJ. JJ Spawn is currently leading the U.S. Open. He had the best ever first nine at a U.S. Open at Oakmont, 31, 4 under, and is atop the leaderboard. So I'm just maybe gonna declare it the year of JJ, and we'll see how JJ does this season. But I'm excited to watch him and a bunch of these other guys in the NFL. Like the the majority of the guys who contributed to that national championship a couple years ago that are going to be in the NFL. Of course, there are still some at Michigan, but the majority of them are now in the league, and we get to watch them on Sundays, and it's exciting.
It is exciting. And I think it was, one of us did that look after the draft of the guys that started in that national championship game. And I think everyone but Rod Moore is in the NFL or was drafted. I think most guys are just in the NFL. There are a couple
Yes.
undrafted guys in there, but
Yep.
it's kind of incredible, not to bring back up kind of some of the ancillary stuff with the allegations of sign stealing and that year is forever tainted. You look at the guys that are in the league and the amount of pro talent that Michigan's put out the last few years, and it's kind of self-explanatory why they did what they did. Typically, when you have a team that does have the most guys drafted in a given year, that's usually pretty emblematic of a darn talented team that if it didn't win a national title, it came pretty close. And um, this year now truly, there are still a few guys left from that, but now this truly does kind of feel like the post national title era Wolverines team. Last year sort of felt like a mesh of the two coming together, some old and some new, but excited to see who from this group now that we'll see this fall winds up playing on Sundays as well.
And just off the top of my head, with what you mentioned there, Makari Page maybe this year. I think he started that game. I know he was a little banged up towards the end of the season, I want to say, but he goes as an undrafted free agent. And then Braden McGregor was an undrafted free agent, but made the team last year for the New York Jets. Josh Wallace, undrafted free agent, but made the team with the Los Angeles Rams, which is pretty impressive considering not a lot of those guys can make it. So even the guys that didn't get drafted, and we'll see what Makari Page does, but those two especially, like they stuck on teams last year for the entire time and contributed. Josh Wallace started a couple games when other guys got hurt, so ton of talent there. Even the guys lower down, and not that those were two defensive starters on one of the best defenses I've ever seen, or a lot of people have ever seen. But even the guys that weren't the top NFL draft prospects are still sticking around in the league there. Um, let's get into some of the guys on the current team and talk about the preseason All-Big Ten teams. We will also get into kind of payments for players and how this is going to work logistically for the House versus NCAA settlement as Michigan now transitions into abiding by the terms of that settlement. And we'll talk about some tight ends at the end. We will start with the preseason All Big Ten teams, and I'll run them down here. We got Athlon, and correct me if I'm wrong, Athlon just did a first team. Does that sound right?
That is, yep. I've been
Okay.
thumbing through the Athlon. They did just do first team for offense defense.
Okay. And then Lindy's did first, second, and third team. Michigan with 8 players on Lindy's, and then one player who appeared on the first team on Athlon that didn't appear on any of the 1, 2, or 3 teams on Lindy's. I'd call that a snub, but we'll start with Dominic Zavada, the kicker, first team on both. Linebacker Jayshon Barham, first team on Lindy's, not first team on Athlon. Edge rusher Derek Moore is the guy I was just referring to. First team on Athlon, not on Lindy's, on the first, second, or third team. Running back Justice Haynes, second team according to Lindy's. Defensive tackle Rayshawn Benny, second team according to Lindy's. The rest of them are all Lindy's now. Edge rusher TJ Guy, second team. Linebacker Ernest Hausman, second team. Safety Rod Moore, second team. And then cornerback Jair Hill lands on the third team. So the first thing that stands out is Derek Moore not on there, probably because he only had 4 sacks last year. TJ Guy lands on the second team for Lindy's. He had 5.5 sacks as kind of a backup, and he started, I think, 2 or 3 games and was a heavy contributor there on that defense. But Derek Moore, much more proven. Derek Moore also ranks, according to PFF, as the 10th best returning edge rusher in the country. So I thought that was a snub. Um, the other thing is just feels good to know that with all the question marks you have with this offense, you do have Dominic Zavada back. You're going to get points if you get to the 35, essentially. So that's nice to see. But a lot of talent on that defense, and then a couple guys on offense there with Zavada, being able to provide points from the kicker spot, and Justice Haynes at the running back spot, and that could have just as easily been Jordan Marshall, I think, with that 1-2 punch that's going to be.
Yeah, it's important to note too, and it's certainly not a shot at the staffs that put these magazines, these publications together, because we firsthand know how difficult, how all-encompassing that is. But
Take a shot at him.
no, it's not. It's not even a shot. Just the reality is that I think that it lends itself to snubs because you're putting a preview magazine together of what is it, 136, 137 FBS teams now, as opposed to, we are all in on covering this team. So we know there are guys on this roster that the average fan will never know who their names are. That oh yeah, so and so, he's from New Jersey, and he also lettered in track and field and threw discus and all that type of stuff. So like I take some of these national previews with a grain of salt. I think when you look at, a guy like Derek Moore from just a numbers perspective, a lot of people don't realize that as good as Josiah Stewart was last year, and I think, did he have a 10 sack season or close to it? Maybe it
He
was
had
eight
eight
and a
and a
half.
half.
Eight and a half is what it was. I think PFF would credit him for nine because they don't do half sacks. But when you look at the pressures, Derek Moore was right up there with Josiah Stewart. Both of those guys had 37 pressures last season. And he's a guy that if he's able to finish off more of those plays and turn them into sacks, I feel like there's a lot of times where he's a fingertip away from bringing down the quarterback. By the time this season ends, I mean, he could be a first team All Big Ten type of guy. I think he's that good. I think there's a lot more to unlock with him too, just because he's played 3 years in college, and until last year, he did most of his work out of a platoon or a tandem or whatever you want to call it. Usually they roll four guys out there, but yeah, all of those seem accurate. When you pick Justice Haynes, you're picking a guy, or when you pick a guy like Justice Haynes over Jordan Marshall, you're picking a guy knowing that, okay, he has had some notable production to Alabama. We assume that because Michigan made this investment in this guy that he might be their lead back. Again, this is the national perspective, but all they saw was Jordan Marshall running 100 yards in a game once in a bowl game against Alabama. But I do think by the time this season's over, Jordan Marshall's probably closer to being your bell cow than Justice Haynes is. So, there are nitpicks here and there, but I think overall the consensus on where a lot of these guys lands, I think it makes sense.
Which one would surprise you the most if they actually ended up where they're placed here in the preseason? Would it be Jay Barham as a first teamer? Would it be TJ Guy as a second teamer, or Jair Hill as a third teamer? I guess those would be the ones maybe you could question, and the ones that I think you're happy to see that they are being viewed as players that can do those things, but they still have a lot to prove. Which one would surprise you the most?
That's difficult. I think the one that might surprise me the most would be, and I'm not even saying that it's out of the question he could do this, but Jair Hill. I think what we've seen in his game so far, the peaks are pretty darn high. He's a fun player to watch when he's on, but the plays that he doesn't make or the snaps where he doesn't win his rep are particularly bad. And right now, I assume going into your junior season, you're gonna level out those peaks and valleys a little bit, but I just feel like for the other guys, you said TJ Guy was second team, Jay Sean Barham was first team. Barham on the first team might be a little lofty too. I could see him being more of a second, third team guy, maybe an honorable mention type of guy. I guess that covers all the range of outcomes. But for me, I just haven't seen enough consistently out of Jair Hill to be comfortable with the idea that like there's a non-zero chance that he might not even be your starter all year. Like that's what happened last year, and it wasn't due to injury. There was some kind of discipline or maturity thing where they straight up changed his number. Now he got his number back, and I assume he's on the up and up. So I don't want to turn this into a crusade against him, but I just need to see more on the field and leveling out those peaks and valleys.
I'd agree that it's Jair Hill, and I think that what do I want to happen the most in terms of like what would be one of those surprises? I think if they could get a corner to emerge as somebody who is on the All Big Ten team, which isn't a small thing anymore, considering there are 18 teams out there and so many different players now in this conference, that would bode really well for the defense because you know what kind of talent they have on the first two levels of the defense. I mean, you got Sharon Moore out there saying that, find me a better edge rusher duo, and they feel like they could have one of the better defensive lines in the country again. Phil Steele has them right in that mix, and for the best D line in the country, the linebacking core has both guys coming back. That typically is a really good thing for a Michigan team because you usually have very good linebackers, and when they have that much experience, not just individually but playing next to each other, that bodes well. The secondary, tons of talent. Maybe not as much at corner in terms of proven guys, but if he could emerge to that level, or if it's Zeke Berry that gets there as an All Big Ten player, that'd be huge. But Yeah, interesting to look at. Michigan with the fourth most selections on Lindy's, behind Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon. Not super surprising there. Decent amount of drop off. I believe Iowa had six as the fifth most team, and then there was a drop off to several teams at four. A few teams like Purdue with zero, and even that doesn't mean you don't have any good players. Purdue might be in that boat; they may not have any, but um, like doesn't mean you don't have any good players. Again, it's just harder to get on these teams now with the
That's
sheer
part
amount
of
of
it.
players.
That's
Yeah.
part of it too. Again, not to veer too far off of um, just the all conference teams in general, but I feel like from the consensus in all of these previews is that you kind of have this top three at the top of the Big Ten right now with Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State in no particular order. But then you have these teams from like four to maybe eight, nine, maybe even as far as 10, where you could see them kind of maybe they're the team that can rise up and make a playoff run, sort of like what Indiana did last year. Everyone's looking for the next Indiana across the country. I think there's probably four or five teams in the Big Ten who could be quote unquote the next Indiana. And when you win at that level, you're going to have more guys on this list because those guys are making plays that affect games and that help you win games. So that's going to be interesting to know too. Like if a team like Iowa, um, let's just say this quarterback that they got from South Dakota State, I believe it is, pops off, and all of a sudden, you wouldn't have him on an all Big Ten list, but they win 9 or 10 games. He plays pretty well, and all of a sudden they're in the mix. Like then you see he's on the list, and a couple other guys from Iowa are on the list. So it's tough to get on there, but a lot of it now is it seems like it's just sort of dependent on the plays you make and the big moments because all these big games are on TV now.
Yep. And they weren't on TV a couple years ago. There were no games on, just one a week on some of these networks. But just kidding. No, you're totally right. And like even like I'm looking at it here, Lindy's third team quarterback, because I was looking this at my magazine here as you were saying that, is Ohio State's Julian Saint. And he hasn't really taken any meaningful snaps yet in college. He could come out of nowhere, or it could be the guy you're talking about from Iowa. I don't even know his name.
Mark
Um,
Gronowski is his name.
you could have said any name there, and I would have just been like, yeah, sure, that's him. But
Yeah.
no, I mean you have that. You have several others like Oregon's quarterback. I think it's going to be Dante Moore, but he's going to have to compete for that job. Who could get there as well? And then Drew Aller. I mean, who knows if he's going to end up being the best quarterback in the Big Ten? He's sitting there as the first team guy. And by the way, Illinois' Luke Altmaier at second team. I don't think he's a lock to stay there either. Like there are a bunch of guys that could be in the mix for some of those. I would bet on Aller being first team because I don't think the Big Ten's as strong at quarterback this year as
Hmm.
it has been the last few. But um, yeah, and I will say too, for Haynes getting second team, there are a ton of really good running backs in the Big Ten this year too. When you go down this list here, but a lot of talent in the league, even though it did lose quite a bit. Ton of Big Ten draft picks, first, second round last year in the draft. But yeah,
Yeah, that's all I have to say about all Big Ten teams.
same here. Let's talk about the 2025 Michigan Football Preview Magazine. Anthony mentioned it at the top of the show, but don't miss out on the Wolverines 2025 Michigan Football Preview. It is our annual 160-page glossy magazine. It's the 37th year of publication right now, long legacy there. First time ever that a true freshman is on the cover. Bryce Underwood, the quarterback, is sported there on the cover. Pre-order your copy before the end of the day on June 16th to get free shipping. If you're an On3 subscriber, if you're with us over at thewolverine.com, you get even greater savings. You can go and save $11 on your copy right now if you want to do that. Check that out over at thewolverine.com on our message board, the fort. But anyone can go online to order right now. If you want to get free shipping before the end of the day on June 16th, which is next Monday, go to bit.ly/um-show, or just click the link, much easier, in the description to the podcast or the video here. Let's talk about the House settlement. I know we mentioned it on Monday. We had a couple questions in our Q&A, but kind of as things play out over the this first week that it's since its approval on Friday night around 9 p.m. You're learning more and more about how this is actually going to work. So we talked about on Monday the $20.5 million in year one that athletic departments that opted into the revenue share portion of this are going to be able to share with their athletes. Standard, kind of what teams are or what athletic departments are doing is football is going to get 75%, men's basketball around 15%. The rest of the 10% goes to the other sports. Women's basketball, probably the biggest share there. Hockey, if you're at a place like Michigan, right up there as well. But women's basketball, big TV deal with their tournament. So they're going to get a decent amount of money. The big question is how you're going to go above the cap. Not these schools, like they all said they wanted these rules and we need to have, some sort of rules here because it's a wild, wild west. But then they all say that, and then all they're going to do now, they're not going to be content at 20.5 million. They're going to be finding every way possible to go above the cap. And I was reading Dan Wetzel's column from ESPN earlier this week, and he says college athletics is back in the rules business after a brief respite during which name, image, and likeness essentially allowed donors to compensate players and recruits as they saw fit. Within college athletics, this was dubbed the Wild Wild West, although it was really just above the table action that has for generations occurred under it. So that's a fear, right? That teams are going to go back to doing that. But in terms of legal ways that Michigan and these other athletic departments can pay players, one is through that revenue sharing, which we just laid out. Two is through real NIL deals, which they can go get themselves or they can be set up, by a collective or marketing agency that works on behalf of the school. And then the third thing is going to be this really interesting loophole, I guess, that our EJ Holland and On3's Pete Nakos have reported about, that before athletes enroll at their school, the teams can pay them. Like, so they can sign, but before they're enrolled in school, the collectives can pay them directly. And this is going to be the case for a lot of elite high school recruits, that you're going to pay them before they get there, so that then they'll also receive their revenue sharing. They'll get their marketing deals, but this would allow you to go, again, to use that term, above the cap. So you have this, maybe that's the legal part of it, that you have all those three avenues that I just said, and then you also have the under the table stuff that's going to come back when you talk about, as Wetzel wrote, the bagmen or cars in grandma's name. Essentially, that stuff that was happening, and he would know, right? We all kind of assume when you hear stories, but I mean, someone that's been covering it this long, like Dan Wetzel, would know exactly. He probably has one he's thinking of when he writes that. But your thoughts, I guess, on just really the most interesting part is that potential loophole of paying some of these high school kids before they get on campus, and I think that Michigan, with how strong their collective's been over the last calendar year, is in a good spot to compete at that level when it comes to acquiring talent.
Yeah, it's all about, I think we talked about this a little bit the other day, just in terms of the settlement going through provides clarity on the math in terms of, okay, if we're gonna, like, how do we, what's the totality that we have of the assets that we have to work with to pay these guys? And I think that the loophole that you're mentioned, or that you did mention, is going to be a big part of it too. As scary as it is to give 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds millions of dollars up front, that's going to be a way to circumvent this. Because there were NIL rules in place, as soon as July 1, 2021, when this all went into effect, that people were able to circumvent and figure out. And there's enough smart people, enough business savvy people in the Michigan circle, that they're going to be able to kind of piece this all together the way that they see fit. And, it keeps changing too. That's part of it. There are aspects of all this where you feel like you're kicking the can down the road. Uh, my opinion, I think the easiest way to get all of this craziness settled down is to recognize that the athletes are employees, and once they are employees, you can sign them to contracts, you can have contingencies in place, you can have rules in place where you can't just take your payday and transfer somewhere else. So it seems like Michigan, for as frustrated as people have been, since the dawn of NIL, which predates, mind you, the three of the best seasons Michigan's ever had, 2021, 2022, 2023. Despite the frustrations about how it's optically looked that Michigan has slow played NIL, they've handled this extremely well, and they've gotten guys to stay and stick around and be a part of some pretty special teams. And even last year's team had a couple big moments, that Ohio State game in particular, because they were able to keep guys paid and happy and rewarded. So feel pretty good about where Michigan sits in all of this. It's super confusing to sift through. Um, here's who's going to get what. Here's the pot it's going to come out of. But as long as there's some sort of synergy and communication between the collectives, between what Michigan has to allocate, they should be okay here. And that's why, now more than ever, it's important to have a general manager, and Michigan's got a pretty darn good one in Sean McGee. So his uh his job's not easy, but it's one that is very important now, just administratively helping get all these things together.
No question. And the interesting part too will be when, and I believe it's tomorrow, June 13 is when deals that are signed, have to start go through this clearinghouse, NIL Go, run by Deloitte, one of the big four accounting firms, and if they're over $600, they have to be approved as real market value by this clearinghouse. And guess what? One of them is going to get denied in the next few weeks, and then one of those athletes is going to go to court, and they're going to say, because to your point you just made about employees, we're not employees. You can't cap what I can make. Who are you to say that this is my value? Then we're really going to see how this is going to go. So as of now, we have this setup, I guess, that we just laid out, and that Michigan's positioned well in. And I think they'd be positioned well in a different setup too, but it could all change as well. So you got to be ready. Like, Michigan was ready to go with this settlement. They've been preparing for a long time. Sharon Moore was talking about it at the end of last season, how him and Sean McGee were planning a lot of this in advance. But and that's just the football side, right? It goes for all these different sports. But um, now you also have to be ready to adjust once different lawsuits come up and the rules change again. So that part will be fascinating, and we'll know more in July as to how this is going to work with that clearinghouse. But they put a cool name on it, NIL Go. Almost reminds me of Succession. What was it, like Comfort Plus or whatever it was? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I forget what the name. What?
Yeah.
Yes.
But like they tried to make some sort of name like that to make it sound like smooth. They're like, oh, this is going to be so efficient. NIL Go. It's like, actually, it's NIL Stop,
Yeah.
because like we're
Well,
going to deny a lot of these deals.
Well, HBO Max was HBO Go, then it was HBO Max, then it was
You're
just
right,
Max, and now it's going back to HBO Go. So I
because people
love all
forgot. Yeah, people
I
forgot it was HBO. So
yeah, well, there's just so much corporate babble name, cool, edgy name stuff. Well, yeah, I'm just it is what it is.
speaking of that, I have like every streaming service now, and I'm trying to re-pull up my Peacock just crashed here watching the U.S. Open on the iPad. But um, yes, so NIL Go, not a streaming service yet, but it will be interesting to watch these, how that works, how that operation works. Uh, let's move on and finish with the best of Steve Casula, Michigan tight ends coach and newly named offensive coordinator, on the In the Trenches podcast with John Jansen. We'll discuss a couple of those talking points here as we wrap up. As Zoom says, we have 9 minutes and 55 seconds to go, and we shouldn't need more than that. But Steve Casula says he jumped out of his chair, punched Max Bredesen in the chest, hugged him, and screamed, "Let's go," when Brady told him he's returning for his fifth season. He says, quote, "He's so important to our on and off the field performance as a team. He's a real one, man. I think sometimes, and not to beat a dead horse, he doesn't get the credit he deserves. He's every bit as good at what he does as what Colston Loveland, was at what he did. I get it. He didn't touch the ball as much, but Max is special, man." And maybe like his position doesn't, there's not a position there anymore, like on the All Big Ten team, where you got to slot in a fullback. I know he's technically kind of a tight end too, but and put him on the preseason All-Big Ten team too.
Oh yeah. I mean, getting him back because for the reasons we've talked about before, where yes, it's exciting that Chip Lindsey is coming in and you've got this weapon at quarterback now in Bryce Underwood. And that's fun. That's a new toy. That's a new system to learn. But the best version of this team that they'll field this year, they're gonna pound the rock. They're gonna run the football with Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes. And there's nobody better in the country at clearing a lane for guys like that than Max Bredesen is. So it's one of those guys, you think of an NFL team, and there's a guy in every NFL team who makes a massive contribution and is just so uniquely like this is who we are that no one else, I won't say no one else has ever heard of, but no one values as much. Max Bredesen is that guy for Michigan football. And I'm just excited to see that guy go to work again because it's usually ends with someone on their rear end.
Yeah, it's not usually him. He's usually, I mean, he's incredible. I know this is like a Max Bredesen pro Max Bredesen podcast. I know we talk about him probably more than anyone, and I think that's completely deserved based on the impact that he's had at Michigan. They did. Steve Casula also mention that they've got to figure out ways to not have these tendencies when he's on the field and all this stuff. But the most amazing thing to me about what Max Bredesen does is like there is a clear tendency when he's on the field. You're more than likely going to run the football, yet it continues to work. Right? They weren't a great running team last year. I think none of that had to do with the tendencies with Max Bredesen on there. You had a couple very good running backs, especially Kalel Mullings was the most productive, and then really a lackluster offensive line. But 10 total catches in Max's career. Last year, out of 356 offensive snaps, 270 of them were run plays at 75.8%. Little math there. 80 on the 86 pass plays he was in on, he only went out for routes on 48 of them, stayed in to block on 38 of them on some of those play action ones, which I think look like those are some of my favorite plays to watch. I don't know why. It's kind of beautiful. He comes in motion. You think he might be run blocking, and then he stops and gets in pass pro on a play action pass. But there's a clear tendency there, Anthony, but doesn't seem to matter all that much.
He's what we call a non-negotiable. Like he is going to do his job regardless. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty special thing to have, and they're lucky he's back for a fifth season.
Marlon Klein. I know he's coming off a bowl game performance that look, Michigan completed 11 passes in that game, right? There weren't many targets to go around, but Marlon Klein was dominant in the run game in that game. Steve Casula said, and he said over those 15 bowl practices, what he saw from Marlon Klein and Hogan Hansen was that they started to get closer and closer to the standard of what a tight end is at Michigan. He said right now that standard is Colston Loveland, but he said it's harder to convince them they have to be at that level on a daily basis when Loveland's around, when they know that he can just get subbed into any game. But once he's gone, and back in December, right, he left to go prepare for the NFL draft, then they realized like we're the only ones left. We have to do this. And he saw that he saw that kind of come into play there a little bit more heading into that bowl game. And he says on a potential breakout season for Marlon Klein specifically, he says he and I have talked about this. It needs to be. He and I together need to make sure that happens because we talked a lot about his ability and his potential. He's helped us win a lot of football games here, played outstanding as an inline tight end this past year. But he and I are both in agreement that it's time for that to happen this fall.
It's going to be interesting for not to loop someone else in on a Steve Casula conversation, but guys like Steve Casula and Lou Esposito, the defensive line coach, came into rooms last year where, all right, here you go. You've got a first round pick, or in Lou's case, two first round picks. Just let them have at it.
What a great job to take.
It's a great job to take and a great place to be and a
And
great
they're both
place to
recruiting
start.
their asses off and they're restocking those.
They are.
Not
They're
to
doing a
interrupt,
great
but yeah.
job. What I think is an interesting sort of subplot to this year is seeing how those guys that step in for the Kenneth Grants, the Mason Grahams, the Colston Lovelands of the world, how are you able to backfill that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge part of all this. But I'm a little higher on Hogan Hansen just because he's played less football. So for me, the more he plays, the better I think he's going to get. Um, but Marlon Klein is still relatively new to all this too. So I, I think the quarterback position in general, just by virtue of having one, is going to be big news for those guys. Because I think even more so than the wide receivers, they're going to kind of be a safety blanket here. So much is needed from them, but I think they've got a good quality position coach, and I think they've got a lot of talent as well.
I agree. And go back and watch the ReliaQuest Bowl. Klein was, I mean, he was blocking his ass off. And maybe that was part of that, switch flipping a little bit in terms of knowing that, hey, I'm the guy now and I got to be that nasty player. And he is more the inline guy. We're going to see them on the field together. Hogan Hansen, next guy, as we wrap up here. Um, he says the next step is to refine his detail and technique. He said, when you play as a freshman, all the good you do is celebrated, and any mistakes are chalked up to being a freshman. Oh, he's just a freshman. He said it's not the case anymore. Life's a little different when you're dealing with Derek Moore or TJ Guy or running routes on Ernest Hausman all day in practice. So that's been an adjustment for him. He said he's really talented. He's really physically gifted. But now, detail, playing with great detail, not everything is like, oh, the ball just found him. No, man, going and winning every route, getting open, and continuing to get better through detail. End quote. That's essentially his job now. They challenged him in the spring, he said, and I know he's banged up at the end, missed the spring game. I don't think it was anything serious, but he's going to have a huge role, and he's got to adjust to life in the limelight a little bit more, and I think he'll do just fine.
I think so too. You could tell early on in a lot of these guys' careers if they have it, just in terms of, okay, this guy can play. And while it wasn't quite to the Colston Loveland freshman season levels, you saw Hogan Hansen out there and you're like, he looks the part and he looks pretty comfortable. I think he was only a 3-star guy coming out of high school as well. So excited about him. I do think there's a good chance that by the end of the year, he is their tight end one. Um, and it's going to be exciting to see how young guys like that grow as Bryce Underwood grows. So I'm very, very intrigued by this tight end room because there's a couple guys in there that I think are on the up and up as well.
No doubt. And yeah, that Arkansas State game, right? Colston Loveland gets hurt. That forced him to not play the next week against USC. But Hogan Hansen was the guy they called on. And remember, they called that pass play for him from Alex Orji, and it was a touchdown. And that was his first career touchdown in what, game 3? So
Mhm.
they clearly saw something in him through the offseason, fall camp, early on in the year that, hey, if someone goes down, like he's going to be the next guy in alongside Marlon Klein. Um, worth mentioning as we end it here, you had Zach Marshall, also played key snaps last year at different times with a broken hand, 7-8 games with a broken hand. Steve Casula said he played 33 snaps. Remember, he was in on that game-winning touchdown against USC. And then Jalen Hoffman had the big spring. They let him play more tight end, a little less of the H-back, fullback position because they felt like he can expand his game. And he showed out in the spring game, had 178 yards, a touchdown, something like that. So tight end room strong. It's deep. A lot of guys that have played snaps, whether it's 33 like Marshall or 418 last year like Marlon Klein. But Anthony, that's going to be our show because Zoom is telling us we have to go. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, head to thewolverine.com, use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1, and click the link in the description to order the 2025 Michigan Football Preview Magazine. And we'll see everyone next time.